Hello, welcome to the live video today. We're going to be talking about child abuse in Kenya and I think the world over. And the story that brought this idea, this topic, is one that we had yesterday. It was a father. His name was John Maina Wangombe. He got home. He found his daughters playing outside. There were two daughters. And then he told them that I have mangoes, so guys, come for mangoes. So the kids were running, going for mangoes. They were happy. And then the father ends up stabbing them. He kills them, and then he sits on a jerrycan, I think a 20-liter jerrycan, and then he locks the door. So when the neighbor calls the kids to have lunch at her place, she can't find them, she can't hear them, and it's a bit strange to her. But when the mother now comes, because she's a small-time trader in Mombasa, she comes back home and then she finds the door is locked. The kids are nowhere to be seen, as in there's a bit of trouble. So they bashed the door in and they found that guy on a jerrycan as his two daughters lay dead. So just wanted to study, why would someone be so cruel to his daughters, right? And as a society, is this an isolated incident, or is this just a general overview of how our society is? So again, I got some research. This one is basically from the UN, UNICEF, and the Republic of Kenya, the Ministry of, I think, okay, just the Republic of Kenya and UNICEF. So here's what we found, right? Before guys get to the age of 18, this is what they experience. Before they get to the age of 18, 32% of females and 18% of males have experienced sexual violence. And what is this sexual violence? Acts of rape, that's completed non-consensual acts. Non-consensual acts that were completed, that's rape, right? The other one is attempted consensual, non-consensual acts. The ones that didn't succeed but they attempted to, let's say like rape, right? And in the case of dudes, this is sodomy. And then abusive sexual contact, like touching. I know kids don't understand these things because their hormones are rushing. Somebody's touching them sexually. They don't really have a grasp of what is happening and what the other person intends or is intending with such contact. So that's part of sexual violence, unwanted sexual contact. And the other one was non-contact sexual abuse, like talking to a kid sexually, right, in a sexual way, in a suggestive manner. That's kind of like sexual abuse, because they, again, kids do not understand these things. They're still trying to understand themselves, leave alone understand what others are trying to do to them, right? So anyway, another form of sexual abuse that was a bit, I think we need to think about as a society, is when parents, they coerce their kids into sexual acts like prostitution. A parent is actually pushing the kid towards prostitution. They see somebody, that person has money, go and get that money, right? And they know the kid has to have sex with that person to get money. So that's a form of sexual abuse, right? And I hope we're together until up to that point. Again, 18% of males experience this, and that includes sodomy. As in, for a man, what is worse than sodomy, right? Again, rape is also very bad for women. And 32% of females experience these acts of sexual violence, as I've put them out. Now, let's go to another one. Just before we go to that one, the most common perpetrators of sexual violence for females and males were found to be their boyfriends, right? So before the age of 18, they already have boyfriends. They already have girlfriends, and the people who are abusing them are these boyfriend and girlfriends, most of them. Like for females, 47% of the people who abuse them sexually, they're their boyfriends or their girlfriends. So the girl is, having these emotions. She's thinking that this is going somewhere, that she's in love, still young, still below the age of 18. But the dude is kind of like, I just want sex, and if you don't give it up to me, then this is what is going to happen to you. So that's a bit sad. And then I'm sure that the ladies cannot speak about it to their parents and to all of those things, so they end up keeping it at heart. So that's a big problem. Again, dudes also experience these things, right? And it's kind of funny because it means that boyfriend, the percentage is 43%, right? 43% of males who have been sexually who have experienced sexual violence have experienced them at the hands of their partners, right? In this case, it would be their girlfriends or their romantic partners. So even dudes can get abused by women. And I'm thinking in this case they didn't put the age specifics, but perhaps it's a younger dude being abused by an older lady. But anyway, we'll check about that later. There's a lot of stories to talk about that. Now, for parents, listen and listen carefully. 27% of sexual abusers for females below the age of 18, they are neighbors. So the first one are the romantic partners, the second ones are the neighbors. So you need to check on that just to protect your daughter. Again, for dudes, it's 21%. The people who abuse them are their neighbors. So I'm hoping that parents can check on these things, right? We have seen that it's their romantic partners, like the boyfriends and the girlfriends. They have them before they're 18. So don't think that they don't have them. And they are actually experiencing traumatic things under this kind of relationships, these young relationships. And the neighbors. Check on your neighbors, right? So anyway, just to jump from sexual violence, let's go to physical violence, right? So 66% of females and 73% of males experienced physical violence. So what is physical violence? These are acts of being slapped, pushed, hit with a fist, kicked, whipped, or threatened with a weapon. This weapon can include a gun or a knife. So this is physical violence. 66% of females experience physical violence. 73% of males experience physical violence. That's more than half in both genders. And when it comes to the males, that's close to 3/4 of them who experience physical violence. So just assuming that physical violence has an effect on children, then it means that more than half of our population, right, in both genders, male and female, they would experience these negative effects of physical violence. And as I'll show in the study later on in the video, there are some negative consequences of these things. Beating your children, pushing them, hitting them with your fist, whipping them, or threatening them with a weapon. All of them, they have their negative effects, and I'll show them research-wise. So who are the most common perpetrators of this violence? Again, we saw that the most common perpetrators of sexual violence were boyfriends and girlfriends of those kids who are the victims, and then the neighbors, right? So we saw that in terms of sexual violence. In physical violence, what do we see? Mothers and fathers were the most common perpetrators of physical violence. They are the most common. And then after that, you'd find authority figures, which is an authority figure like a teacher or a policeman, because dudes mostly they get beaten up by teachers and policemen, right? So that's the statistics. So we find that our society is actually contributing. Again, it's sexual violence, it's physical violence, and I'm about to go to emotional violence. Everybody is participating in our society in dealing with these kids violently. Everyone, from the parents to the neighbors to their romantic partners, even the young ones, to their teachers, we are exposing our kids to violence. Everybody as a society, like it's a conspiracy against the children. Beat them, be violent against them, all of those things. Anyway, so here we go to emotional violence, and this is again a research by UNICEF and the Republic of Kenya. So here's what they found, right? That emotional abuse, how they defined it, is the feeling, calling a kid's bad names. Like I tell my friends, there is no way my wife would call my kid stupid. I do not see that. I will. Anyway, there will be an issue. Let me just say that, right? Making kids feel unwanted, that's emotional abuse. Because where else will they go if they're unwanted? In their own home. Where else would they go? So they have to contemplate, they have to think, and it would break their heart, because nobody wants to be unwanted, and then you have nowhere else to go. So the kids, they do not have that mindset of searching, looking for alternative places, or looking for solutions, like trying to make that person more receptive to them. right? So they don't have that. So it's a form of emotional abuse. And then threatening your children with abandonment. I'll leave you. You go. All of those things. It's a form of emotional abuse. And for those who have been in emotionally abusive relationships, you know how bad it can be. So why would you emotionally abuse your kids? So that's the thing. Hi. Just to go on, emotional abuse for both females and males, most often inflicted by parents. Again, so we see parents, starring appearances in emotional violence and in physical violence, and then neighbors and the young romantic partners appearing in terms of sexual violence, right? So at least I think we've gone thus far. We know who's being violent to the children and how they're being violent to the children. Again, all of these are forms of violence. So children exposed to sexual violence, they are mostly exposed to other forms of violence. It seems that sexual violence does not come in isolation, right? It does not come in isolation. And most of these other cases of violence, they don't come in isolation. If a parent is physically abusing you, it's likely that they're also emotionally abusing you at the same time. So it's two kinds of abuse at the same time. For others, it's three forms of abuse at the same time. Like 13% of females and 9% of males experience all three forms of violence at the same time during their childhood. And those are the things we're doing to our children. The ones we say that they're our future. That's what we're doing to our future. So anyway, let's go to why do they do that? My thinking is that they do that because of hatred. There's a certain hate in them, and this is how I define hate. Hate is the absence of love, right? And just to elaborate on that point, let me give an examples. There is nothing like darkness. There is only the absence of light, right? There is nothing like cold. There's only the absence of heat, right? Likewise, there is nothing like hate. There is only the absence of love, right? So parents who abuse their children, neighbors who abuse their children, these young partners who abuse their children, it's all because there's a lack of love. And so their children become objects. To others, they become physical objects so that you can beat them and release your stress. To others, they become objects where you can release your emotional stress on them by transferring what you're feeling to them. To others, it can be an object where you can express that sexual tension within you towards those kids. It's the absence of love. And when love is absent, you take people as an object. The same way you take a tool as an object, a hammer, there is no emotion attached to it. You beat that hammer. It's only for nailing or removing nails. There is no person. There is no need of caring for that person, and that's why we are violent to them. So anyway, so that's my opinion, that it results from hatred. So what do people say? The reasons they give for what I'd call the excuses they give for abusing their children, either emotionally, physically, or sexually, right? So there's this. Let me go to London, right? We've already had the Kenyan case. Let's go to London a bit. So there's this father in October 2018 who stabbed his 8-year-old daughter to death. Now this is what his problem was, right? His wife had left him, so she went for another man, and the dude said, I'm okay with that, just do your thing, I'm okay with that. But he wasn't okay with that. And what did he do as his revenge? He stabbed his 8-year-old daughter to get back at the mother. And the police, they say this was the most selfish act imaginable. They couldn't believe that someone would do that out of revenge for someone else. You're killing a kid, stabbing 8-year-old, nothing done, just because your wife moved on to another person. So that's one of the reasons that people give for abusing their children. And let me give another example. When dudes discover that that kid is not theirs, or when mothers have step kids within their homes, they abuse them because they feel that those kids are not theirs, right? So that's the excuse they give. Those kids are not theirs, but in essence, it's hatred that is in them. the lack of love. So let's get to another one. Some people say that they're tired of taking care of children, so just get rid of them. You are tired. Life is hard. You don't see a way forward, and then you just say, you know what? Let's all go. Right? Let's all just leave. And you kill your children because of that. It's cowardice. And because at the end of the day, you know that you have a responsibility towards those kids. And as long as they are alive, you will have that guilt that you're not taking care of them. So your response to that is to just kill them so that you can free yourself of guilt, right? Because you don't want to face it, because you're a coward. And what strengthens us to face things like guilt? It's love. But when you don't have it within us, then we don't have courage. And we can't take care of what we need to take care of. So let me go to another one. Unnatural tendencies towards their kids. There are people who have unnatural tendencies towards their kids. They perceive their kids in a sexual light, right? And they don't know how to handle these emotions, how to fight them, and how to remove them from their hearts. So the only response that they have is to get rid of the kid. And I think after that they get rid of themselves. Like I remember there was I was watching Daily Mass, right? And the priest said that one of the unspoken problems that fathers have is when their daughters develop and they become, they develop reproductive organs. Like now when you hug them, they have reproductive organs with them, right? So the priest was kind of like, fathers need to find a way of dealing with that kind of situation, right? Such that you don't push away your kid without your kid understanding that perhaps things have changed, right? And at the same time, you need to, perhaps it's all in your mind, and you need to get rid of whatever fears that you have in your mind. But those are the people who talked to the priests, right? There are people who don't talk to their priests, people who have sexual tendencies towards their kids. Give an example here. There's a man who came home, right? He was a night guard, and then he sent his sons to the shop, and then his wife was working as a waitress. So he sent his sons off to the shop so that he can be alone with his daughter, right? And he abused his daughter sexually, right? And when the two boys came home, because they went to the shop, when they came home, they actually saw him abusing their sister, and it was a shock to them, and they just stood there in shock, and they were looking at whatever that was happening. And when the mother came back and she heard all of these things that were happening, what did the father do? The father started to beat the mother. That was his response. He started to beat the mother. But the mother was courageous. Why? Because she had love in her heart for her daughter, and she reported this case. No amount of violence would put her down. She had to report this case, and she did. And the guy was caught, and I think, I do not know how the case progressed from there, but that's just a story that I wanted to give you, right? And you can see what people resort to. Instead of facing their fears, instead of facing their desires, they decide to run away from them, and they do that mostly through violence. Beat that person who is going to speak to people about that, to keep them quiet, or kill that kid, so that they think that by cutting off the kid, they'll cut off their disordered desires. It's just an escape. It's not dealing with it. So anyway, so that's part of the reasons that I believe that people, especially when it comes to sexual violence, I believe that is some of the excuses that people give for that. But it's all basically, at the end of it, it's all a lack of love for their kids. Because when you love their kids, you'd get over anything. Example, the guys who went to the priest to talk about their daughter's development. So let's go to, now those who are the kind of like, okay, what I've given is what I believe is the main reason: hatred, the lack of love. And then there are these other excuses that seem plausible, which are unnatural tendencies towards kids. You feel that you can't take care of them, and to spite the mother, like beef between you and the mother, right? So these are the kind of like the reasons that you could give that seem plausible but are not plausible. But now the excuses, the peripheral excuses that we give are as thus: alcohol, that you drank too much and you ended up beating your kids or abusing them. Or anger, right? That you were angry at something and you decided to beat your kids. Or that you are poor and you had no other choice, and that poverty is causing you to do these things. So alcohol, like the father who killed his two daughters, who stabbed his daughters in Mombasa, while the mother was working, right, and sat on the jerrycan. That guy was drunk at that time, and that could be an excuse that people give, right? But it's not. It's the lack of love for the kids. And then somebody could say that the kid made me angry, very angry. And when they say that, anger does not drive you to certain things. And if you're angry, then love would keep you back. But if you do not have love, the only thing that's there is anger and violence. So anyway, when it comes to poverty, just some data from, this is an organization called Childline. So people say that poverty makes you poverty is one of the reasons why people abuse their kids. I do not believe that that is so. Why? Because this data from Childline says the most distressing calls, the calls that people made to report child abuse, the most distressing ones came from the richest counties in Kenya: Nairobi, Kiambu, and Nakuru. Nairobi, Kiambu, Nakuru, and Kisumu. So the richest counties have the most distressing calls to report child abuse, right? So is it about poverty? If it was about poverty, we wouldn't have these calls come from the poorest counties. So anyway, just to leave it at that. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. That was Frederick Douglass. We'll talk about him in future because he was a Republican and I love Republicans. But that's for another day. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So if you start breaking your children from a young age, then it's harder for people to bring them back to who they were supposed to be. It's harder for them themselves to bring themselves back to where they should be, right? And that's why this sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse is so bad, because it damages children, and once they're damaged, they grow up damaged, and that damage grows instead of reducing. And by the time they realize that, yes, I am damaged, yes, I need to change, by the time they realize that there's so much damage around them, additional damage, that they don't know how to change and how to become who they were supposed to be. So that's what Frederick Douglass was trying to say. And just to give an example, again from the UNICEF report, females aged 18 to 24 who reported sexual violence in childhood were significantly more likely to report anxiety. Those who were sexually abused, unwanted touching, rape, attempted rape, all those things, they have feelings of anxiety more likely. They have depression, they have suicidal thoughts, they suffer from poor health than those females who did not experience these things. So that's what we do. That's what we do to our children as they grow. When we abuse them, when we expose them to violence at such a young age, that's what we do to them as they grow. We increase their level of depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, all of those things. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So start building strong children. It is written, train a child while he is young, in the way of the Lord while he is young, and he shall not depart from it. That is exactly what Frederick Douglass is trying to say. Start building strong children with strong values at this time. Don't abuse them. So anyway, people talk about corporal, people say that when you beat your children, right, you're disciplining them. And if you go to, like in America, you'd find that blacks and Hispanics, they kind of like, they really focus on that. You know, what, my mama, you know, you guys talk well, as in the way you talk to your white mom is not the way I talk to my black mom, because my black mom would whoop my behind and all of those things. But then when you look at the incarceration rates, you'd find that blacks are more, they're more violent, they're more likely to go to prison, right? Because these things don't work. They don't work. Physical violence against your kids do not work. But I'll give some research. Some people say that spare the rod and spoil the child. Okay, you can say that, but why don't we cut off people's hands when they steal? Because this verse was put there to give us an indication that we should discipline our child. We should not, like when Jesus holds the rod, he shall rule the world with the iron rod. It means that he shall not waver. He shall not move aside. It does not mean that you go and start beating your kids. No, put the rod here. If your kid is stealing, he should not be stealing. But it does not mean you start beating your kids. It does not mean that. Because if you take the verses literally, then we'd have to start also cutting off people's hands. But you see, what we do as adults, again I say it's a conspiracy against the children. What we do as adults is that the verses that would allow us to abuse them, we take them literally. But the other verses that would lead to abuse against ourselves, no. For those ones, we take them as they are, as they should be taken. So that's my argument for that. Anyway, so just to go on, what's the solution, right? The solution is for, let's say, like the people who abuse, to seek help. But less than one out of every I think 10 females who experienced this kind of abuse was able to seek professional help. Less than 10% actually got it. So there were those who sought professional help. Less than 10% actually got professional help. So professional help is not forthcoming. And here's the professional help should be coming from the children's department, right? So a study by a Canadian researcher found out that bribery and corruption, right, deny children justice to the children. So even bribery and corruption is here. That even our kids are not sacred. We would not defend them because we want money. And what do the officers do? This Canadian researcher found that the officers take the children back to the place where they were abused. So the abuse continues. It doesn't stop. Right? The department, it also says that it's underfunded, which is also true, right? Perhaps underfunded because they are corrupt, but also underfunded because the government does not really care about this issue because they're kids, right? Yeah, and they also say that they don't have space, so that's why they're taking kids back to their abusers. So that's what I had for you guys today. And just to conclude about the corporal punishment between your kids at home, so I'll just go quickly over some research. This is a research by Rajalakishmi. The review of literature led to the conclusion that the use of corporal punishment has not just physical, emotional, and psychological consequences, but could have a major role in retarding the process of normal development in your child. So when you beat your child, you are actually there's chances that you are interfering with his brain development, causing him to be a retard. So that's basically what we're saying. Another research says that it's a human right violation, and it goes against the modern norms of decent treatment of juveniles. Juveniles, like the Catholic Church teaches, they have inherent dignity. You're supposed to treat them as humans, not as subhumans because they're kids. And they treat them with decency, right? Treat them with decency. So that's another research. So these are the one I like the most. Parental corporal punishment, right? Like beating your kids, spanking them, all of those things. They lead to a high level of compliance. Okay. Including was associated with all child construct, including high levels of compliance. So they comply with what you're trying to tell them. It leads to aggression, high levels of aggression, and lower levels of moral internalization and mental health. So their mental health deteriorates, their idea of morality deteriorates, but in terms of compliance and aggression, they will comply with what you're saying, and they will become more aggressive in life. So the research says that beating your kids, spanking them does not work. And that's what I have always been trying to tell people. If you need this research, tell me. If you don't believe me. So anyway, take care. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.